Hello and welcome to What's Your Story? We have a great guest for you today. You're really going to enjoy him, Dr. Mort Orman, and he's an internal medicine physician, a corporate health and wellness medical director, and what's really interesting about him that you're going to love is he was the creator of the National Stress Awareness Month, and that's been going on since April of 1992. This man knows all about stress. So welcome, Dr. Orman. So happy to have you with us today.
Glad to be here, Judy. Thank you for inviting me.
This is so fun. This is my very first Zoom TV show that I've ever done. So thank you for being my guest. You're down in Florida. How's your weather down there?
About 70 degrees right now. Nice.
Ooh, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little cold here. Well, let's talk about you because you're a very interesting man. For my audience, I had the opportunity to get to know Dr. Orman over the last year. We're in a mastermind group together, and he's a fascinating man. Just about anything you want to ask him, he ends up knowing something about it, and he's read every book in the world. So he always shares good books with me. So tell me this. How did you get interested in helping people, I want to say get away from stress or deal with stress? I know you don't manage stress. You told me a dozen times you do not manage stress. So how did you get interested in this?
Yeah, well, through my medical practice. I practiced internal medicine for 23 years. And during that time, I saw a lot of patients, come to see me because they had heart attacks and strokes and other things, and they were very stressed out in general and had been stressed for a long time, and eventually it caught up with them and caused some illness or disease or something like that. And of course, all the people that have high blood pressure and a lot of stress-related physical problems that people had. So I was attuned to stress in my patients. And in medical school, they didn't really teach us very much about how to help people deal with stress. And most doctors don't really know how to do that. And I was one of them. I didn't know how to do it. But mainly I got involved because of the stress that I experienced as a physician and that I saw in my colleagues. Being a doctor is a kind of a high stress position, and a lot of other professions and other occupations can be very high stress. And so I experienced a lot of stress myself, and it really demoralized me and bothered me because I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. And I kept trying different things and nothing really worked. Tried the standard approaches that most people recommended, didn't help. And then I had kind of a personal breakthrough where I discovered some interesting things about stress that most people don't know and didn't know back then. That was like 40 years ago. Turned my whole stress problem around where I basically got rid of most of the stress I've been experiencing after not being able to do anything about it for many years. And that's when I said, gee, now that I've seen this, I've got to share this with patients. I've got to share this with people because it's a big health problem in the world today.
Oh, it's a big health problem, and it gets bigger every day, I think.
Yeah, COVID certainly hasn't helped the last 2 years.
No.
That's just put more stress on people. But I think COVID also revealed that we weren't well prepared for how to deal with a heavily stressful situation. Mm-hmm. And we don't get taught in school how to do it. We don't get taught in general how to do it. I know I didn't get taught in medical school really much about how to do it. So we're really unprepared when something big like COVID hits. Now, certainly stress was there way before COVID happened, but COVID just accentuated it and pointed out that people really need to get themselves trained better to understand how to deal with stress when the next thing comes, whatever that will be,
Exactly. Well, you focus a lot on business owners' stress. Is that not right? You help business owners to overcome that incredible stress that they have from, I was a business owner and I know there was amazing stress that went with it.
Yes, and I'm a small business owner myself now. Now, I'm retired from medicine, but I still have a business that I run. And again, because of COVID, I thought that the business owners were hit pretty hard and experienced a good deal of stress. So I wanted to do something to help that population. But also business owners, I think, are a really good population of people to work with because, number one, they understand the value of systems for the business. And I created basically what I've done is created a system for dealing with stress So I think that they would appreciate, that systems work. You don't have to try to convince them that systems work. You just have to show them the system, and hopefully they will be interested in learning how to use it. And they're also usually very dedicated, committed people. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to help people or solve problems, whatever. And so they're very motivated. And that's good too when you're working with somebody and trying to teach them how to deal with stress. If they're not motivated, they're not going to take the help that you're giving them and do anything with it. So that's why I kind of decided to focus on business owners specifically in 2022, and and going forward. So that's the group that I'm going to be working with primarily, although I do work with other folks as well.
What makes the approach that you have different than these people that say they teach stress management?
Yeah, I don't recommend that people manage their stress. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with stress management techniques like yoga, meditation, relaxations. I mean, they all have benefits in terms of health. I just don't think they're very effective for dealing with stress. I mean, they mainly deal with symptoms. And I have found that in general, and most people actually know this, that if you have problems in your life and all you do is deal with the symptoms of them, those problems are going to continue to bother you until you get at the causes. So what I discovered 40 years ago was how to get at the causes of my stress in a way that I didn't know how to do before. And that really opened the door for me to finally solve a lot of the stress problems I was having, like getting angry all the time, getting frustrated, feeling anxious, being deathly afraid to speak in public. That was something that I absolutely would avoid at all costs because it was very anxiety producing.
Well, it's supposed to be like the #1 fear that people have.
Yeah. And some people say it's more of a fear than dying, than speaking in public. And I think the second leading fear is going to a party where you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
They're
Any
kinda
kind of a
similar.
networking event where you don't know people is very stressful.
Yeah. So what I do is I help people understand the causes of their stress. And you have to understand when you're talking about the causes of stress, there are always two types of causes. There's the external things that are going on that are stressful. And most people can easily see those and identify them. And a lot of times that's all they focus on when they think about causes. Oh, I got my boss is causing me stress. My kids are causing me stress. The economy is causing me stress. The politics is causing me stress. They're looking at things outside of themselves, and that's as far as they look. But you really have to also consider internal causes of stress, which are thought patterns and behavior patterns within us that are contributing. And that's what I didn't know how to recognize until I discovered how to do that. And then it really opened the door to solving a lot of these problems. Because a lot of times you don't have control of your external circumstance. You can't really change or fix or get rid of your boss, or get a new spouse or new children. So, the things you can't change externally, but internally, how you react to the situations that are going on, you have a lot of control if you understand what the dynamics are and how those things are being created.
Does it help to understand what triggers you?
Well, it's not just those are usually external things that trigger you, but understand what gets triggered inside of you. So if somebody makes me angry, for example, I can easily see what they did, what they said, what they did, that made me angry. Okay. What I usually can't see unless I know how to do it is, well, what did that trigger? What thoughts did that trigger in me? How am I looking at that situation? That specifically, not generally, but like exactly how am I thinking that made me angry? And when you can see that, when you can see I'm thinking A, B, C, and D, and that's why I'm angry, then you can look at those things and say, well, are those things that I automatically assume to be true really true? And a lot of times you'll find they're not. You just made an assumption, or you just automatically got triggered to see something a certain way, or think about something a certain way, or even behave in a certain way. And it may not be either the best way to behave or a correct assumption or interpretation. And unless you know what those are, you don't really have much of a chance of questioning them and challenging them and seeing whether they're right or wrong. And when you can see, when your anger is being driven by some assumption that you made that's incorrect, as soon as you recognize that, your anger just goes away. You don't have to punch any punching bags. You don't have to run around the block. You don't have to take deep breaths. You just see the situation differently, and there's nothing to be angry about, you know? A good example is
I think I better take this course. I know you have a course that you offer. I think I need it so I don't have to punch the bag anymore, because boy, there are days I just want to punch people out.
Well, I think everybody needs to, I mean, we really don't understand our emotions as a society. And you can see that. Just look at politics the last 2 years. There are so many people that are just lost it emotionally. And they don't really understand why they're getting triggered and what's being triggered inside of them. They understand what's triggering them, but they don't understand what's going on inside of them that's making them angry and making them crazy. And if they did, they would be able to do something about it. The fact that they haven't been trained to understand that, for the most part, means that they're powerless to do anything about it. So they just keep getting their emotions tweaked by the media or by whatever, and then it's just an endless process of them being stressed over and over again by something they actually could take control of if they could understand it better. So that's what I teach, that's what I do, that's what I've been using that same kind of system that I developed 40 years ago. I've been using it every single day of my life for the last 40 days, and I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I didn't have that.
For the last 40 years?
For the last 40 years. It has saved me so much trouble, so much emotional turmoil, so many relationship conflicts that I avoided, or relationships that would have ended, kind of poorly, had I not understood the things that I now understand about relationships, about emotions, about stress, about a whole bunch of things that frankly I didn't know when I was in practice in the first few years of medicine, that I had not been taught in all of my education, college, medical school, medical residency, a lot of stuff about human beings that I just didn't understand. We're not really taught how to take care of human beings in med school. We're taught how to take care of organs and brains and livers and spleens and bones and joints and things like that. But there's a lot about the human being that we just aren't really taught to understand. And then when you go into practice, you see people, real human beings, come into your office every day with problems that real human beings have, and thoughts and ideas and theories that real people have, and you have to figure out how to deal with it somehow. And doctors just kind of stumble their way through it as best they can. They don't get a lot of formal training. And
my doctor walked in the office one day in the room where I was, and he looked really tired and stressed and burned out. And I said to him, "And how are you today?" And he looked at me for a long time and he said, "You're the first person that's ever asked me that." And I thought, what?
Yeah.
And I seriously thought about that a lot later. Doctors have a lot of stress, and yet we depend on you to make us feel better, but what do we do to help you feel better?
Yeah, and a lot of times doctors aren't even motivated to have themselves feel better. I mean, in some ways they sacrifice their own mental health and physical health at times in the service of their patients. They put their own needs aside, and because they have important work to do for other people, and they don't take care of themselves well sometimes. They don't learn how to deal with emotions and stress as they can, and they figure they don't have time, because they have to spend all their time taking care of patients and worrying about what happens to their patients. A lot of times they neglect their family members and end up getting stressed there because of the demands of medical practice. So there's a lot of stress, and it's not just the medical profession, dentists, other kinds of health professionals, and other professions as well.
Yes.
Lawyers, accountants, not to mention, emergency type folks, police, fire.
Oh, I can't imagine what policemen and firefighters go through, the stress they must have when they're dealing with some of those emergency situations.
Yeah. And often the training, either they don't get much training, or the training they get is geared towards stress management. It's geared toward helping them deal with symptoms and pretending that the causes aren't important or they don't exist, or they're outside of them. And they never get training, or rarely do they get training in how to understand what's going on inside of them that's generating a lot of the stress they're experiencing.
Dr.
So
Orman, are Are you available, let's say if the fire department decided they wanted to bring you in to work with all their firemen or the police department, are you available to do that kind of work?
Sure, sure. I'm always open to those kinds of things where I can help. If someone wants to bring me in, if a company wants to bring me in, or a business owner wants to bring me in, not just to help that business owner deal with their own stress of being a business owner, but if they want to help me help their employees. Because
Yes.
they all recognize their employees are stressed out. In
Yes.
fact, I was at a conference a couple of years ago, a health and wellness conference for businesses, and there was a presentation there by a company that every year does a study of thousands of companies all across the world, and talks to their HR departments and asks their HR departments, what are the things that you think are the biggest priorities for your workforce, that you think your workforce needs help with, and things like they listed things like nutrition, weight loss, exercise, stress, financial problems, stuff like that. And across the entire country, stress was either number one or number two in just about every country in the world, every company in every country in the world.
Wow.
It's that well recognized as a detriment for business and a costly problem for businesses to have to put up with. And sadly, the people that they usually bring in to do trainings are still in this stress management mindset, which I got out of 40 years ago, thankfully. And I've been talking about it. And no matter how much I talk about it or write about it, or it's the mentality is so strong, it just overwhelms any dissenting opinion. It's really been quite amazing to see that.
What are some of the things that people believe about stress that aren't really true?
Well, there are actually a lot. There's actually a lot. So we'd already talked about how most people believe the best way to deal with stress is to manage. And if you stop and think about it for 10 seconds and ask yourself, is managing the symptoms of my stress the best that I can ever hope to do? Most people realize, well, no, I mean, if I could, I'd like to get rid of the causes. But they don't think that they can. So they kind of dismiss that possibility and say, okay, well, all I can do is deal with symptoms because I can't really deal with causes. Or the causes are all these things outside of me and I can't really do anything about them. And again, they neglect the fact that there are causes going on inside of them. So that's a big one. That's a big one. People falsely believe that stress is just a part of life. You just have to endure it. You can't escape it. It's just an unavoidable aspect of modern life. And, with all the pressures and demands and technology and, COVID and this and that. And the truth is, we all have enormous abilities to get rid of stress from our lives. If we, again, just knew how to understand it correctly and had a proper system for eliminating it instead of managing it, we could all do that. We could all learn how to do that. So it's not really true that stress is inevitable. It'll appear to be true if you don't do the right things to get rid of it. Then it'll feel like, well, you can't do anything. But that's only because people haven't been exposed to different alternative ways of looking at stress and dealing with stress, the kinds of things that I've been sharing about and teaching for the last 40 years. So those are a couple of the big ones. I mean, there are a lot of other ones, like people believe there's good stress and bad stress, and I show them how that's completely false.
I was just going to ask you that. They say that eustress is good stress and distress is bad stress.
That's crazy. That's crazy talk. Nobody talks about good things in life as a problem, as a stressful problem. One of the things I say is, I practiced medicine for 23 years. I never had a single person come into my office on a Monday and say, hey, doc, I got real excited at watching the football game on Sunday. Can you help me with that? It's not stress. When you go to a horror movie and you get scared, that's not good stress. That's just, well, you wanted that. It's not a problem. It's not hurting you or harming you or interfering with your joy in life. In fact, you enjoy going to a horror movie when you go, So the idea that we had that these good stress, called good things that stir us up physiologically, call that good stress. When you and I use the term stress, we're almost always talking about something bad that we don't like, we don't want. It's harming us or potentially harming us or just making us feel bad, or making us feel tired and drained, frustrated, feeling overwhelmed, all those kinds of, experiences that people have when they say they're stressed. And so it's always a negative thing for us. And so forget this whole talk about good stresses. They're just good experiences.
Well,
they're not good stress.
in most of the companies that I've worked with as a professional trainer, their number one problem within their organization is communication, or miscommunication, I should say. That seems to be a major problem in all corporate life. Plus, it seems to be a big problem in our homes as well. And I would say that that's one of the causes of stress. Would I be right there?
Absolutely. And I would go further. I would say often it's an internal cause of stress. In other words, whoever's doing the communicating doesn't understand how to properly communicate, or doesn't understand the mistakes they're making in the way in which they communicate, or the way they understand communication in the first place. Okay? And so that's something internal to us, how we understand, think about communication, the strategies and tools that we have for communicating effectively. We can improve those within ourselves. And then we don't have as many communication failures and breakdowns, and clashes and things like that, because we've trained ourselves to be better communicators. That's a perfect example of an internal cause of stress that people have control of. Nobody's communicating for you. They're not forcing you to be, you're choosing the words, you're choosing what to focus on, you're presenting your communication however you do, with whatever body language and tone and other things that go into it that you may not be aware of, but you're doing it, and you have control over it. If you're doing it poorly, you can understand how you're doing that, fix it, and get some help and fix it, and end up, not having as many communication. And I would agree with you. I worked in a corporate environment for 15 years, and the communication was usually horrible and stress generating in the employees.
Well, and I think the communication we have with ourselves is also affecting.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of negative self-talk and putting ourselves down and beating ourselves up. And that is something, again, that's an internal cause of stress. Nobody else is doing that but us. And maybe we get trained how to do it by our society and by, growing up. You get all this correction from your parents and, don't do this, don't do that, bad for doing this. And then we continue it, we kind of get automatic, it's programmed into us. And then our bodies just keep doing it. We just beat ourselves up when something goes wrong. We criticize ourselves, we blame ourselves. And then that spills over when we start blaming other people. And that creates stress, Blaming other people rarely makes things better. But we think it does, so we do it. And it ends up making things worse most of the time. So those are all internal causes of stress that we don't often notice.
And are those things that are not addressed when people are studying how to overcome stress? Do we not address that? What kind of advice? Well, let me just put it this way: what kind of advice fails people? What does most advice about stress fail to teach us?
Or to help people. Why does it fail to help people? And there are a couple of reasons for that. The main one is it's mostly in this stress management kind of mindset. So stress management is not just a set of things to do, like yoga, meditation. There's a whole mindset that goes with it, that's underneath of it, that supports it. And a lot of the understandings are wrong, which is where I had the breakthrough 40 years ago, is being willing to admit to myself, or at least consider the possibility, that everything I was taught about stress in medical school, and that I read about stress, and that stress experts and researchers were teaching, isn't really true. And that was very hard for me to believe that could be possible, because I was a very scientific-based physician. I respected science, and if science said something, I didn't question it. And so science says a lot of things about stress that it's not that it's false. I mean, the studies have been done, the physiology that they've studied, there are physiologic changes that happen when we're under stress. That's all true. But the implications that they've drawn from it, and the stories and interpretations they've drawn from that about what stress is and where it comes from, a lot of that's false. And that we've been misled, and we've been taught to misunderstand stress, and that hurts us in terms of being able to deal with it effectively. So So a lot of that advice isn't good because it feeds into that whole framework of stress management and the mindset underneath it that doesn't work. But another thing I point out, for example, whenever I go on a show, maybe not here so far, but, but whenever I go on a show, what the host usually wants is, well, give our audience some tips for how to deal with stress. What can our audience do to deal with stress? That's like, for me, that's the worst question in the world you can ever ask, is give me some tips for dealing with stress, because that's just superficial Band-Aid stuff. And it's never going to penetrate deep enough. What people really need to do, and what I do with people when I work with them, you've got to change your entire understanding of stress from the ground up. You need to realize what's wrong with the understanding that's been given to you by other people and by society. And then you have to build a new understanding where you really understand what stress is, where it actually comes from, what's better than stress management for dealing with it, how do you use that approach, what are the tools and the strategies that you need, what are the understandings that you need. You got to build that whole system up for yourself. And that's why I don't give people tips. I think it hurts people to give them tips. It makes them think that the tip that they get, whatever it is or how great it is going to be the thing that's going to, change the course of their life regarding stress. And it never does. You can give people 1,000 tips. And if you don't change the underlying mindset and mentality, it's not going to make a difference. Yeah, they might get a little bit better in some situation here or there, or learn a new skill that they can use. They can do that. But in terms of a deep transformation, I mean, if you look at my life, to go from being a very angry person like I was as a medical student.
I can't imagine you being angry. You're always so mellow.
Oh no, I was a very angry person. I was like John McEnroe. I used to play tennis. I played like John McEnroe. I was, cursing and thrashing my racket all around and beating it against the net and around, and anything really would upset me. And that's the kind of person I was. And to be able to go to be a person that hardly ever gets angry at all, and that's been the way it's been for me for the last 40 years, that's a humongous change. And it doesn't happen from a tip or 10 tips or 100 tips. I had to change my whole way of understanding anger and looking at anger and realizing what was going on inside of me when I was angry. And when I got those insights and that awareness, I was able to step in, take control, and stop being an angry person.
Well, I certainly hope you've written a book about this.
Oh, I've written about 15 books about it. So I've been sharing a lot about it. And
so can we find those books on Amazon or?
Yes, they're on Amazon. You can find them. Some of them I've written I haven't even published. They're just sitting on my hard drive.
You better get them published because the world needs this.
Yes, they will be at some point.
And I understand that you do online training where you help people online. They can go on and take a course that you've offered there.
I have some online courses. What I'm really focused on now is putting together a very comprehensive, in-depth, deep dive program for business owners. So when business owners decide they really want to do something about their own stress as a business owner, and they're willing to admit that they have it, they're willing to admit they're not good at dealing with it, and that they need help, then I've got a program that's ideal for them. It involves a lot of my online trainings, a lot of coaching with me, a lot of group coaching. Some of the books that I've written will be part of the training. But it takes them month by month in the different aspects of the system that I built that I use, so that by the end of 6 months, they've got that same system in their brain that I have in my brain. It's really almost like, what I'm really doing is like doing a brain transplant. I'm taking my brain and what I've learned about stress over the last 40 years, and I'm transplanting it into the brains of those business owners who decide that they want to work with.
Well, I've been experiencing your brain for the last 6 months, and I tell you what, I think I could use the course myself. That would, because
I need to acknowledge I'm not licensed to actually do brain transplants. So yeah. It's not a real brain transplant, but it's like a Vulcan mind meld kind of a thing.
Yes. Well, yeah. Dr. Orman, would you tell my audience how they can get in touch with you if they would like to reach you or to talk to you about a program or get one of your books? Or?
Yeah, well, the books are on Amazon. There's two good ways to reach me. I have a website, docorman.com. That's DOCORMAN.com. and my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Doc Orman.
We'll put it up on the screen so they can see it as well.
So either of those ways they can get to me and message me once they get there, and I'll be happy to chat with people if they have an interest.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, as always, it was wonderful talking with you. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. I hope you'll come back for our very next episode.